let's discuss some definitions that you're really going to need to know in order to play guitar. Okay, so we're not going to pick up the guitar and play just yet because there's a few things that we just really need to know. I've got my notes here, so you'll probably see me glancing down. I'm going to be scanning the same document that you're going to be looking at that's attached to this video. But really important that we get these definitions down, okay? So the distance between one fret and the next, okay, is called a half step. Okay, from here to here, it's called the half step. So if we're moving from 1 to 2, that's a half step distance. Okay, basically a half step distance is the smallest movement that you can make on the guitar from one to the next fret. Okay, if we're moving 2 frets, that's called a whole step. So 2 halves make a whole, right? So 1, 2, 1, 2. So 2 half steps make a whole. So that distance there is a whole step. Okay? And we're going to be using these a lot later, so I do want you to remember it. And then obviously after this video, I want you to make sure that you go through all those definitions and make sure that you know them well. Okay? A sharp is when we raise a note. Okay? We can use this as a noun or an adjective or a verb. There's many different ways that you can use this. So we won't go over all of those, but in a nutshell, a sharp is when we raise something, okay? When we raise a note up in pitch. So let's say we're going a half step up. Okay, I'm sharpening that note. Okay, so we can use the word sharp in many different ways. Same thing with the word flat, and flat is when we move a note down. You can think about it like pressing a balloon down. That's how to know the difference between the two. Sharp is when we go up, and flattens when we go down. So if we're lowering a note from, let's say, this note here, down, okay, I'm flattening that note. Okay, really important that we know that. The whole steps and half steps we're going to be using a lot later, okay? Now, we said that the distance between one fret and the next is a half step, right? Well, another word for distance, when we're talking about music, okay, we're talking about the distance between 2 musical notes, is called an interval. Okay, we're used to using that word when we're talking about time, an interval of time. But when we're talking about music, we're not talking about time, we're talking about pitches or musical notes. Okay, and so later on, you're going to see that there's all sorts of definitions, and they're easy to learn. They're not overwhelming. So when I say all sorts, don't get overwhelmed. It's really easy. I promise you, you're going to get all of this. All right. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe that you're going to get all of this. Okay. Just one step at a time. So the distance between one note and the next, or any note, is an interval. Okay, that's kind of the broad spectrum of that. And then we have half steps and whole steps and 1.5 steps and 2 steps and so on. Okay, a chord is 3 or more notes played at the same time. Okay, if I just take the guitar and I do this, that's a chord because I just hit 6 strings, and the definition of a chord is 3 or more notes. Now, usually, as a rule of thumb, we'd like those chords to sound harmonic. We would like them to sound pleasant, okay? But they don't have to. This could be a chord. Those are chords. Whether my hand's on the guitar or not, 3 notes, whether the guitar is tuned or not, it is a chord if you're playing 3 or more notes, okay? And later on, we're going to learn some definitions for those chords to determine whether a chord is major or minor, okay? Now, an arpeggio is when we take a chord, any chord, and here's a chord, that's a C chord to be exact, and an arpeggio is when we take that chord and we break it up. And it doesn't matter what order we do this in. You know, we can do this in any order. We could finger pick it. That is an arpeggio of some sort because we're just taking the chord and we're playing it in different parts, okay? Again, major and minor, so we talked about this earlier. Basically, you're going to see a definition there that you're not quite going to get yet because we're talking about the major scale and we're talking about intervals. We're talking about a first and a third and a fifth. It's not going to make too much sense to you right now, but I will define it later on. So really you don't have to know anything other than there is a chord called a major and a chord called a minor. The most commonly used chords are those two chords, so we're going to be using them a lot. And basically, for right now, the only thing I want you to get from it is that a major chord typically sounds happier and a minor chord typically sounds a little bit sadder. So for instance, E major sounds like this, and E minor sounds like this. So it's a little bit sadder sounding. Here's A major. And here's A minor. So it sounds a little sadder, okay? And that reason is that there's a note in there that's getting smaller, or an interval distance that's getting smaller. It's going from a major interval to a minor interval, and that's why we call the chord major or minor. All right, so those are all the definitions that we need for right now. Okay, we're going to be learning a lot more as we're going on, but step by step, slow and steady wins this race. I promise you. Okay, so do not get overwhelmed. If you're feeling overwhelmed, just take a little bit of a break and then come back when you're ready. Okay, check out the PDF that's attached to this video and make sure you go over those definitions. Read the whole thing down. There's some of it you're probably not going to get right now. Totally okay. We're going to be using this document for other bits and pieces later on. Let's keep going.